At a basketball game, a match is currently going on between Team Kaka and Team Drive, but neither of the two teams has managed to put a single point on the board yet. One of the guys in the crowd named Yeonjun is nervously scribbling something down, so the person sitting next to him asks him why he keeps looking around like that and tells him that he really needs to stay focused on the game. The match keeps going and Sichin manages to steal the ball away from Team Kaka and then quickly passes it back over to a smaller guy on his team. Everyone watching thinks to themselves that just a little while ago, that same small guy was clearly playing as a local level defender and nothing more. The small guy, whose name is Jinsu, thinks back to what Jaewoo told him just yesterday, which was that he had spent a lot of time watching Kaka's games and going through a bunch of their videos, and that from everything he saw, Kaka always ran a man-to-man defense style no matter what situation they were in. Coming back to the present moment in the game, the ball makes its way over to a Drive player named Suk, who is currently matched up and going head-to-head against Junil on the other side. Junil tries everything he can to get in the way and block Suk from moving forward, but Suk manages to blow right past him anyway and keep on going. He then manages to score a goal and puts the very first points on the board for his team, which makes some of the players start thinking that Team Drive might actually go on and win this thing. In a flashback, Jaewoo is sitting with Jinsu and tells him that Suk had shared something with him, and that he is going to go ahead and pass that information along to the rest of the group as well. He then goes on to explain that the plan is simple, which is that the 5 members who each have strong personal skills are just going to go out there and handle things on their own without any complicated strategy. Back in the present, the ball is now in the hands of one of Kaka's players, who quickly passes it off to another teammate, and then that player does the same thing, and the cycle just keeps on going like that. On top of that, all 5 members of the team keep passing the ball around between each other over and over again until the ball eventually makes its way back over to Team Drive's side. Then one of the guys from Team Kaka casually winks over at a girl who is sitting in the crowd watching the match, and she sits there wondering to herself why Team Kaka keeps insisting on sticking with a man-to-man defense even though they have someone as dangerous and skilled as Suk on the other team going up against them. She also knows that Suk has good stamina, so it won't be a problem to attack like that throughout a game. The ball is now with Suk, who then quickly breaks through another player of the opposite team. Suk then tries his absolute best to throw the ball into the basket but gets it blocked by one of the players from the opposing team. He refuses to give up though and quickly spins around, gets past the player, and finally manages to throw the ball into the basket successfully. At this point in the game, the score for Team Drive sits at 4 points while Team Kaka is still stuck at 0. Seeing how things are going, everyone in the audience starts talking among themselves about how Team Kaka really looks like they are on their way to losing this match. They also point out that compared to last year, the team has gotten a lot weaker since so many of their key players have graduated and moved on. However, 2 of the boys sitting in the audience turn to a guy nearby and ask him how many of their players actually graduated, and the guy tells them that among those who left were Nobun and Junil. Moreover, there is really nobody left on the team who can be considered a main player anymore. One of the boys then says that maybe Team Drive is going to end up winning this a lot more easily than he originally thought, so the guy then turns around and asks them if they even remember who the top scorer in the entire school league was last year. The guy then reveals that the top scorer from last year's school league was actually none other than Junil himself. The match then continues and Junil manages to score for the very first time in this tournament, and this time it is against Team Drive. The ball then makes its way over to Jinsu, who is now going man-to-man against one of the Team Kaka players right in front of him. One of the players from Team Drive thinks to himself that Junil is a kid who already managed to overcome both Youngmin and Lee Jong-gun, so it is definitely not going to be easy or simple to strip the ball away from him with just that level of defense alone. Junil then calls over to Tail and tells him to get back safely to their side, and once Tail gets back, Junil turns to Jinsu and tells him that he seems a lot more relaxed and calmer than he actually expected him to be. The match then keeps on going with Team Drive continuing to play really well like they normally do, and they even manage to put another goal in which brings their total all the way up to 6 points. However, Junil then gets his hands on the ball and drives straight toward the basket without hesitating at all and scores another point for his own team as well. Everyone watching gets completely caught off guard by that and starts thinking that this guy might just be on a whole different level from everyone else out there. Player number 55 from Team Drive thinks to himself that Junil is incredibly fast, and that back when they filmed together, he had assumed that the only thing truly special about him was his jumping ability, but now seeing him out here in a real game, he realizes that Junil actually has the best overall athletic ability he has ever seen in his entire life. After that, the match keeps going with everyone getting really worked up and into it, and the ball eventually makes its way over to Suk. He then manages to blow right past one of the defenders and launches the ball straight into the basket, which brings Team Drive's total score up to 8 points. The ball then gets picked up by one of Team Kaka's players, who immediately fires off a quick long-distance pass to one of his teammates down the court. The girl watching from the sideline starts thinking to herself and wonders that whether the opponent manages to pull off the attack or completely fails at it. The idea is that early offensive moves are pushed out right from the start no matter what. On top of that, she thinks that if a real scoring opportunity is right there in front of them, then they should go ahead and try to put the ball in the basket without wasting any time at all. She then thinks further that if a good chance does not show up because the other team's backcourt players are moving too fast and covering too much ground, then they can always just slow things down, reset, and set the play up all over again from scratch. In addition to that, overall, it is a really smart athletic strategy that is specifically designed to gradually wear down and drain the physical strength right out of the opposing team over the course of the game. The match then keeps going and Team Kaka manages to get some points on the board as well, and now they are sitting at 7 points while Team Drive still holds 8 points. The ball then gets over to Suk, who immediately gets cut off and blocked by a Team Kaka player, but before that player can do anything to stop him completely, Suk pulls off a clean and proper fake that gets the defender off balance and manages to get right past him. However, just before Suk can actually convert and score a point for his team, a Team Kaka player jumps in at the right moment and intercepts the ball before it can go anywhere. Team Kaka then starts firing on all cylinders and playing at their absolute best, and they manage to score another goal that pushes them ahead of Team Drive on the scoreboard. The ball then finds its way to the player known as Goblin on Team Drive's side, and he thinks to himself that he needs to be the one to figure things out and make something happen on the other end this time around, since Suk has been going really hard and probably needs a little bit of a breather. A Team Kaka player then comes charging straight toward Goblin trying to strip the ball away from him, but just at that moment another one of Drive's players steps in and sets a solid screen, so Goblin quickly takes advantage of the opening and fires the ball right back into the basket for the score. With that, the scoreboard gets to 11 points, but the referee tells the score setter to set it back to 10 because the thrower stepped on the line. The match continues with Team Drive Kaka player running past Team Drive's player and notices that Team Drive is setting up something again. Junal then runs towards the basket, but one of the players tries to steal it, so he runs past him and throws the ball back in the basket. After that, Team Kaka gets awarded a free throw and they manage to sink the ball into the basket 2 consecutive times without missing either shot. The match then gets back going with Suk getting his hands on the ball and managing to run right past a Team Kaka player before launching the ball up toward the basket. But to his surprise, the ball just clips the pole and bounces right back off without going in. The ball then gets picked up by one of Team Kaka's players, who takes off running all the way across the court to push the ball over to the other side. He then fires a pass back over to Junal, who immediately takes off running straight toward the basket with full speed. But just as he goes up to try and put the ball in, one of the Drive players shoves into him and gets called for a foul. Team Kaka then gets awarded another free throw as a result, and Junal is the one who steps up to take it, and as he stands there at the line he thinks to himself that he has not had very many chances to actually shoot throughout this game, so it has been really hard for him to get into a proper rhythm and find his shooting feel. He then manages to sink the ball into the basket, and one of the Drive players stands there thinking to himself that Junal's tempo and pace are just moving way too fast for them to keep up with. A guy sitting up in the audience seats watches everything unfolding and wonders to himself whether Drive is just going to keep attacking in the exact same way they have been, and whether Suk is really their most powerful and dangerous weapon on the court. The match then keeps going with Suk running hard and moving all around the court with the ball, but just at the moment when he is about to go up and score, one of Kaka's players accidentally clips Suk's hand with their fingers while trying to defend. Because of that, Suk gets awarded a free throw and he goes ahead and converts both of his free throw attempts successfully without missing either one. Team Kaka's players then turn to Junal and tell him that he should go ahead and take a little rest on the side because he is looking a bit overwhelmed and worn down out there on the court. Junal tells them straight up that he is doing just fine and that they do not need to worry about him at all, but deep down the rest of the boys on the team still have a strong feeling that something is genuinely not quite right with Junal and that he might not be as okay as he is letting on. The match then picks right back up with one of Team Kaka's players getting possession of the ball, but he finds himself immediately cut off and blocked by Goblin who is standing right there in front of him. Team Kaka then manages to push through and score a goal anyway, and the score now sits at 15 points total. Suk then walks over to Jinsu and tells him that this time around he and Sichin are going to run a two-man play together and work off each other. Jinsu then takes off running forward with the ball, but he quickly gets cut off and blocked by a defender who steps right into his path, so he immediately makes the decision to dish the ball off to Suk instead. Suk then takes the pass, puts his head down, and drives in a straight line directly toward the basket without slowing down at all, and goes ahead and puts the ball right in the basket to score another point for his team. Seeing what just happened, Jinsu surprisingly starts breaking down emotionally instead of feeling happy about the score, which makes everyone around him feel really weird and confused about his reaction. Meanwhile, one of the Team Kaka players stands there wondering to himself whether this was some kind of hidden card that the other team had been keeping up their sleeve the whole time, because that was a type of shot he has genuinely never seen anyone pull off before. Suk then spots one of the Team Kaka players and thinks to himself that this guy is probably planning to launch the ball all the way forward in one single go the moment they manage to score a goal. Suk then makes up his mind right then and there that he is going to do absolutely whatever it takes to make sure that plan fails and never gets the chance to work. The match then keeps going with one of the Team Kaka players going up and throwing the ball toward the basket, but it just smacks off the pole and bounces right back out without going in. The ball then finds its way over to Suk, who also goes up and tries to put it back in from where he is standing, but it just refuses to drop in and rebounds right back out as well. Eventually the ball ends up in Jinsu's hands, and he goes ahead and launches a long-distance shot from way out, but that one also just clips the pole and comes bouncing back out without going through the basket. The first quarter then ends with Team Kaka at 1-point lead against Team Drive. During break, one of the Team Drive supporter thinks that he was more nervous than usual earlier and he is having a hard time. He also thinks that the tournament is a different pressure game, and then the burden is bound to be great. He then asks his friend if Yongjin should be changed, but the guy says that it should be the case. After that, the second quarter gets underway and player number 55 gets swapped in as a substitute, and he is going to be the one out there on the court for this round. However, Team Kaka has absolutely no information or background on this guy at all, so the only thing they can really do right now is stay alert and pay close attention to everything he does out there. The ball is now in the hands of one of Team Drive's players, who then breaks through Junel's defense really easily and smoothly, and instead of going straight up to throw it into the basket himself, he makes the decision to pass it off to one of his open teammates nearby. That teammate then catches the ball and fires it into the basket right away before anyone can react, and the score goes up, which ends up catching everyone completely off guard and surprising them. Going back to earlier, the coach had specifically told the team that as soon as the other side scores, the first thing they need to do is check for the center's long pass and get the backcourt set up right away. Back in the present, the ball is now with one of Team Kaka's players, and he thinks to himself that the speed on the first pass coming from the other side is pretty slow, which means there is absolutely nothing stopping them from going ahead and pushing the pace with an early offense right now. On top of that, the ball ends up with Junel, who then takes off and runs right past most of the players standing between him and the basket and go ahead and score the points really easily without much resistance at all. The match then keeps going with Team Kaka scoring goal after goal one right after another, and at this point they have racked up 19 points total on the scoreboard. One of the Team Drive players stands there and thinks to himself that it should be pretty easy for Kyungo to handle Kaka, since the guy he is going up against is a slow-footed player who does not move around the court all that quickly. The ball then gets over to Sichin, who manages to get right past Junel by pulling off a smooth rotating move and then bursts forward with a lot of speed and momentum. But instead of taking the shot himself and throwing the ball into the basket, he decides to pass it back to one of his open teammates behind him. That teammate then catches the ball and fires it straight into the basket without hesitating, which brings his team's score up to 19 points as well and ties things up on the scoreboard. Now the ball gets back into the hands of one of Team Kaka's players, who then quickly passes it along to Junel. Junel then takes off and gets past a whole bunch of Team Drive players standing in his way and passes the ball off to one of his teammates. Jinsu then rushes over to challenge that player and try to stop him, but a Team Kaka player immediately steps in front of him and tries to set a screen to block him out of the way. However, Jinsu does not stay behind and pushes forward past the defender, which makes the player who is holding the ball really frustrated and furious about it. Despite feeling that way, the player still goes ahead and shoots the ball up toward the basket, but it just smacks off the pole and bounces right back out once again without going in. The ball then gets picked up by one of the Team Drive players, and now he finds himself going one-on-one directly against a Team Kaka player, and it turns out that the Team Kaka player he is matched up against is none other than Junel himself. The Drive player then attempts a spinning move to try and get around Junel and create some separation, but just like happens so often in situations like this, he gets cut off and blocked by another player who steps in to help out. He then makes a quick decision and fires the ball off to another one of his Drive teammates nearby, and that player catches it and thinks to himself that after receiving such a clean and perfectly placed pass like that, if he somehow fails to put this ball in the basket for no good reason, he is going to feel like he is committing some kind of sin. He then takes a deep breath, gathers up his courage, and releases the ball toward the basket, and it goes in cleanly and directly without hitting anything on the way through. Meanwhile, a guy who is sitting in the stands watching the whole match thinks to himself that player number 89 is an average player overall. But despite looking physically weak and having basically no dribbling ability to speak of, his shooting is difficult to stop. He also thinks that this is a player who really cannot do much of anything else on the court on his own, and that shooting is the one and only real strength he brings to the table. He also believes that there is a very specific reason why a player like that exists on a team like Drive, and that the moment that player catches the ball, all the defenders in the area immediately shift their attention and focus directly onto him. To avoid getting caught in the eyes of those defenders, he is always making smart moves to find himself a good open spot on the court where he can receive the ball cleanly. On top of all that, he believes that even Junel is not going to be able to completely shut that player down, because Junel always has to stay ready to jump in and help out his teammates on defense at any given moment, and if Junel keeps getting pulled away to help, that player is just going to keep on causing problems and making everyone suffer out there. Junel then turns to Isla and tells him to just keep a close eye on how that guy plays defense, pointing out that his shooting looks clean and that it is genuinely very hard for him to miss when he gets a good look at the basket. The match then keeps going with Team Kaka passing the ball back and forth among themselves really smoothly, and they even manage to pull off another score on top of it. Seeing that, one of the Drive players completely freaks out on the inside and thinks to himself that they are just not doing anything useful out there and are being absolutely no help to the team at all. The ball then gets over to one of the Team Drive players, who takes off running straight toward the basket to try and throw the ball inside, but a Team Kaka player steps right up and blocks him hard, even contacting him in the process. One of the Team Drive players who is sitting on the sideline watching thinks to himself that player number 77 is actually really solid and capable on the defensive end as well. It turns out, for some reason Suk had not been marking him or paying him any real attention out there on the court. He thinks back and realizes that at first, Suk did manage to break through and get past him, even though it was not easy and he was really struggling against the defense. But as the game kept going on, the blocking and pressure just kept piling up increasingly, and breaking through became harder with each attempt until it felt nearly impossible to get anything going against him at all. The match keeps going with one of Team Drive's players charging hard toward the basket with the ball in hand while Junel is right behind him giving chase and trying to catch up. The player then goes up and throws the ball toward the basket, but it smacks off the pole and bounces right back out instead of dropping in. Right at that moment, another Team Drive player appears out of nowhere and rushes in to try and put the rebound back up into the basket, but it just bounces right back out once again without going in. The ball then lands in the hands of one of Team Kaka's players, but before he even gets a single chance to do anything with it, a Team Drive player swoops right in and rips the ball clean out of his hands. The ball then finds its way over to Minsik, who wastes absolutely no time and immediately fires it straight toward the basket the moment he gets it. With that score going in, Team Drive now has 25 points on the board while Team Kaka is still sitting right behind them at 23 points. The match then gets right back underway with Team Kaka getting possession of the ball and carefully passing it back and forth between their players, working it around patiently before eventually going up and launching it toward the basket to try and cut into the lead. The ball clips the post on the way and just bounces right back out without dropping in. Jinsu then gets his hands on the ball and thinks to himself that thanks to everything Suk and Kyungo have been doing out there, he has only managed to put up 2 points so far, and that it is now his turn to step up and take the lead and make something happen for his team. Jinsu then passes the ball back over to Minsuk, who catches it and goes up to throw it toward the basket, but that one also just gets a rebound and bounces right back out, and another one of the Kaka players rushes in and picks it up off the bounce. That player then takes off running hard toward the other side of the court and pulling off a slick ankle-breaking crossover move that completely throws his defender off balance. He manages to get himself a clean look and goes ahead and scores the points for his team. On the day of the very first game at the school, all of the players from Team Drive get themselves ready and prepared for their upcoming match against Team SSB. Jinsu stands there and thinks to himself that the new uniform does not really feel all that new for some reason, and he figures that it might be because the team name on it happens to be the same as his own name. Once they all arrive at the ground together, one of the players from Team Drive looks around and starts wondering out loud who exactly went ahead and got them all uniforms, and also questions whether they are even properly registered as official players for the tournament. Minsik then speaks up and calmly tells everyone that he was the one who went ahead and ordered all the uniforms and took care of the registration on his own. Hearing that, everyone immediately starts firing questions at him one after another, telling him that he really should have let them all know about it beforehand instead of just going and doing everything by himself without saying a single word. Jinsu stands there taking it all in and thinks to himself that Minsik is honestly just a completely strange guy, and that if it bothers anyone else that much, then they should have just gone ahead and done it themselves instead of complaining about it now. The player with glasses then steps forward and goes ahead and lays out the lineup for today's match for everyone to hear, announcing that he himself will be taking the number 1 spot, Jeonggayo is going to be number 2, Youngjin will be coming in at number 3, and Minsik is going to be the 4th one in the lineup. Jinsu feels a strange unease as he starts questioning whether Jeonggo is really being used as a shooting guard and whether there is any actual intention of winning the match. Another player on the team brings up that Youngjin's shot success rate and overall activity on the court are really high, which makes him possibly the better and more reliable choice for the position. Right at that moment, Team SSB walks in, and the whole atmosphere shifts as everyone's attention goes straight to the most handsome player on that team, a guy named Sunhoon, and his presence clearly catches everyone off guard. Jinsu is quick to say that he already knows who Sunhoon is, pointing out that they are the same age, but the girl standing next to him is fast to jump in and say that while they are the same age, the two of them could not be more different from each other when it comes to skill and reputation. Jinsu also reveals that Sunhoon was actually his opponent during the semi-finals the year before, which adds a bit of history and tension to the whole situation. Sunhoon recognizes Jinsu as well and walks over to him, making it clear that he had no idea the two of them were going to the same school, which genuinely surprises him. Shortly after that, everyone gathers as the match officially starts, and it kicks off with Sunhoon sending the ball over to his side of the court. Without wasting any time, Sunhoon takes off in a full sprint straight toward the other end to go get the ball, and everyone around him is left completely shocked by just how insanely fast he really is. Shortly after, Sunhoon pulls off a slam dunk that leaves everyone completely stunned and the whole crowd starts cheering loudly for him. Jinsu thinks to himself that this is really no surprise given how insane Sunhoon's physique is, and he finds himself wondering how he even managed to block someone like him back during last year's match. The ball then makes its way over to the glasses guy on Team Drive, and he says out loud to the other players around him that he does not see what the big deal is about a dunk, but before he even gets the chance to do anything, a player from Team SSB steps in and steals the ball right out of his hands. That SSB player then drives all the way down toward the basket going for the score, but just before he can get the ball in, the glasses guy comes crashing hard into him. The referee wastes no time calling it a foul and announces that SSB is being awarded 2 free throws. Seeing this, the girl turns to Jinsu and asks why they are doing free throws right now. Jinsu breaks it down for her, explaining that when someone gets fouled while they are in the middle of shooting, they get a free throw, and if the shot does not go in, they get 2 free throws, but if the shot actually goes in, the score still counts and the player gets 1 bonus free throw on top of that. SSB ends up scoring 3 points in just the first 10 seconds of the game. Things start getting harder on the other side as SSB's guard Juno is the type who really likes playing pressure defense, which makes things especially tough for Woojin since his dribbling is not exactly his strongest skill. The match keeps going and SSB wastes no time scoring again almost right away, bringing their total up to 6 points. The ball then ends up in the hands of the glasses guy, and when the SSB players notice that, they start openly mocking him and telling him to just pass the ball off instead of trying anything himself. The glasses guy gets really fired up hearing that and tries to push forward anyway, but the ball gets picked off by another SSB player before he can do much of anything. Because of Woojin's turnover, the score jumps all the way to 8 points in less than a minute, and this matters even more because of how college game rules work, where having a bigger score gap actually works in your favor and gives you a clear advantage over the other team. After that, Minsik gets really frustrated and straight up tells the glasses guy to hand him the ball since it is pretty obvious at this point that he is struggling to keep up with the level of play out there. The glasses guy passes it back to him and tells him to go ahead and give it a shot himself since their defense is really tight right now. Team Drive then tries to keep the ball moving with quick passes before the other team gets the chance to put any real pressure on them. However, one of the SSB players is already thinking that this kind of approach is not going to work for much longer and that they will not be able to keep it up. The rest of the SSB players all start feeling like the fun part is basically over now since this strategy is simply not going to cut it for Drive. Minsik then pulls the glasses guy aside and tells him that whenever he is in a position where he cannot move, he needs to make sure to pass the ball out in front of him so that Minsik can run into it and receive it cleanly. The match picks back up and the glasses guy ends up passing the ball around pretty randomly despite Minsik clearly telling him to pass it out in front of him. About 2 minutes into the game, Drive finally manages to get on the board for the very first time thanks to Sichin, and at this point there are only 8 minutes left before the first quarter comes to an end. Even though Team Drive puts in their best effort, SSB still manages to stretch the score gap even wider. The ball finds its way to one of the SSB players who is already thinking to himself that he basically already has the score in the bag, wondering why none of the Drive players are even bothering to get in his way and stop him. After that three-pointer goes in, SSB starts playing even more aggressively, and with Sunhoon's overwhelming physical presence and really solid fundamentals driving everything forward, they just keep on scoring without much resistance. As it turns out, only 8 minutes into the game, Sunhoon has already racked up 6 points, 1 assist, and 1 block, which is a pretty insane number for that early in a match. Juno, who had led SSB to 4th place the year before, is also putting on a really strong showing, already racking up 8 points, 3 assists, and 2 steals in just the first 8 minutes of the first quarter, making it clear that SSB is firing on all cylinders while Drive is struggling to find any real answer for them. On Drive's side of things, the situation is not looking great at all, as Woo Jin keeps giving the ball away with one turnover after another, and Jiango is not helping either since he is missing every single shot he puts up, which means Drive's whole attacking game is basically falling apart completely. The match drags on for quite a while after that, and by the time things settle, SSB has pushed their score all the way up to 22 points while Drive are still sitting at just 6 points with not much to show for their effort. During the break, Jinsu sits there going over everything in his head and comes to the conclusion that this team has way too many problems piling up at once, thinking about how the first guy cannot even dribble properly yet walks around like he is the best player on the court, and how the second guy simply cannot get the ball to go in no matter what he tries. After the break, Minsik turns to Jinsu and tells him that he is going to be putting him in for the next part of the match because he looked really good during the practice games and the team seriously needs someone like him right now. Jinsu responds by saying that he actually has an even better idea to share before they get into it, pointing out that during the defensive plays, Woo Jin kept slipping up a lot, but he does not think that is really Woo Jin's fault at all, and that the real issue is that the backline has not been making proper defensive calls to guide everyone into the right positions. He also brings up that Minsik should be the one guarding at the center instead of Sichin, since Minsik is much better at making the right calls when things get hectic out there. On top of that, he suggests that since Jiango is clearly not in great shape and is having a rough time, Woo Jin should be the one marking number 2 instead so that the defensive assignments make more sense overall. Everyone listens to what Jinsu lays out and they all agree to go along with the strategy he is putting forward, but when Jinsu goes on to suggest that Jae-woo should be the one marking number 17, that catches everyone off guard. Jae-woo is quick to push back and says that since he cannot dribble well enough it would make way more sense to put Yeonjun in that spot instead, but Minsik steps in and says that Jae-woo is actually the better option than Yeonjun for what this specific situation is asking for. After everything gets sorted out, everyone heads back onto the court for the second half, and there is a real sense of anticipation in the air as everyone is desperately eager to see what Jinsu is actually capable of when he is out there playing for real. The match gets going again with Jinsu getting his hands on the ball, and his plan from the start is to work it all the way down to Woo Jin at the far end of the court. All the SSB players immediately start closing in on Jinsu from different directions, but before any of them can actually get to him, he gets the ball out to another player just in time. Jinsu then keeps working his magic by continuously faking out and deceiving the opposing players, moving the ball around cleverly until it eventually finds its way to Minsik, who then gets shut down by an SSB player closing in hard on him, leaving him with no clean passing lane to get the ball over to Sichin. Rather than forcing a bad pass in that direction, Minsik makes the smart call and fires it back to Jinsu before the situation gets any worse. Right at that moment, 2 SSB players converge on Jinsu and cut off his space completely, but just before either of them can get their hands on the ball and take it away from him, Jinsu launches it up toward the basket and it goes right in. Seeing that, everyone gets surprised and wonders why Team Drive didn't send someone crazy as him earlier. At the same time, the girl watching from the sidelines also finds Jinsu cool, because previously she thought of him as just a goblin. The ball is now with Team SSB's player who is trying his best to get past the glasses guy. The ponytail guy then passes the ball to his teammate, but Jinsu manages to intercept it. Jinsu takes off and drives straight toward the basket, but the moment he sees that he is about to get blocked, he quickly fires off a pass to the glasses guy without hesitating. The glasses guy catches it but immediately feels like something is off about the pass, and he starts wondering to himself why everyone seems to think Jinsu is such an amazing player when passes like that are coming his way. He then goes ahead and tries to put the ball up into the basket anyway, but it just does not go in no matter what he does. Seeing that, Minsik gets really frustrated and calls him out, asking why he cannot manage to score from right under the post even a single time, but the glasses guy snaps back at him and tells him to shut up. Over on the other side of the court, one of the SSB players takes notice and thinks to himself that the whole atmosphere of the game has clearly shifted ever since that guard came back in, and that they need to start running their attack through Sunhoon to regain control of the game. Going back a little earlier, Jinsu had pulled Minsik aside and told him that since he is the center, his one job is to stay glued to number 43 at all times and make sure he does not get his hands on the ball. He also reminded Minsik that Team SSB almost always kicks things off by going through that guy, so if they can successfully shut him down and take him out of the equation, they actually stand a real chance of turning things around. Back in the present, Minsik is giving everything he has to keep number 43 locked down, so the SSB player holding the ball looks elsewhere and decides to swing it over to the ponytail guy instead. The ball then continues to pass around before one of the player throwing it to the basket, but it doesn't go inside. The ball is now with Jinsu, who decides to take it slow from now on and tells everyone to get back to their positions. As it turns out, thanks to Jinsu's solid performance and Minsik's steady and reliable defensive calls, they manage to hold the other side back and do not allow any scores to get through on their end. However, the attacking side of things stays heavily focused on Minsik and Sichin as the main outlets, and despite all of that effort, the score difference between the two teams stays right where it is and does not budge much. Jinsu plays a really important role during all of this by being the one responsible for getting the ball into the right hands at the right time, and by the time the second quarter comes to a close, the scoreboard reads 32-19, meaning the 13-point gap between the two teams has held steady throughout the entire quarter. On top of all that, both Minsik and Sunhoon each pick up one foul during this stretch, and the overall pace of the second quarter feels like it moves by really quickly, largely because of those stoppages and the tension surrounding them. After that, Jinsu puts together a really impressive stretch of play that helps push Team Drive's score all the way up to 21. Jinsu gets his hands on the ball once again, but this time Sunhoon steps right into his path and cuts him off, thinking to himself that if he can just kill Jinsu's momentum and stop him from driving forward, it should make it a whole lot harder for him to get a clean shot off. Rather than trying to push through and go forward anyway, Jinsu instead pulls up and launches a step-back three-pointer that flies through the air and drops straight into the basket without any trouble at all. Jinsu tries to say something to the glasses guy, but the glasses guy just shuts him down coldly and tells him to keep his mouth shut. Jinsu used to think that if a situation like this ever came up, it would not really get to him, but he turns out to be completely wrong about that as the third quarter gets underway with his head feeling all over the place and completely cluttered with thoughts. The tension on the court keeps building steadily as the point difference keeps swaying back and forth around the 10-point mark, keeping everyone on edge. Right at the tail end of the third quarter, Jinsu comes down wrong and sprains his ankle, and while it is not the most serious injury in the world, it is bad enough that pushing through and continuing becomes really difficult, so he makes the call to take himself out and rest on the bench. Jinsu turns to the girl nearby and reassures her that these kinds of everyday injuries usually clear up pretty quickly after a short rest and that she should not worry too much about it. The fourth quarter then gets going and things go south almost immediately, as the point difference that the team had managed to grind all the way down to 10 points suddenly starts blowing wide open again and spirals completely out of control. The people watching from the sidelines start losing interest and begin feeling like there is really nothing left worth watching anymore, thinking to themselves that it is basically all over for Drive. They also notice that the whole team seemed to just fall apart the moment their smallest player got hurt and sat down, and with the score gap being as massive as it is and not much time left on the clock, they figure the outcome is as good as decided already. Team Drive ends up losing the match against SSB, and Minsik is so furious at the glasses guy that he cannot even bring himself to look in his direction. Everyone then shifts their attention over to Jinsu to check up on him and make sure he is doing alright. One of the guys decides to step up and help Jinsu get to the hospital, and on their way there the two of them happen to cross paths with the glasses guy, who stops and asks Jinsu how his leg is holding up. Jinsu brushes it off and says that he is perfectly fine before starting to walk again like nothing is wrong. Jinsu's friend then brings up that he heard somewhere that Jinsu has been ignoring Woo Jin for some reason, but Jinsu is quick to push back on that and tries to make it clear that he is not ignoring anyone at all. Jinsu then turns back and looks straight at the glasses guy before loudly blurting out that it actually does hurt, which catches everyone off guard. On his way back home, Jinsu finds himself lost in thought, wondering why every single thing in his YouTube search history has something to do with basketball, and why just hearing the word basketball is enough to make his whole body feel a certain kind of way. He starts questioning whether he is only into basketball because he is just going along with his friends, but he quickly shakes that thought off and reminds himself that he genuinely loves the game, though somewhere in the back of his mind the idea of quitting basketball still quietly lingers. Meanwhile, the rest of the club members are all gathered together having dinner, and the conversation turns to how they are going to need to win every single one of their remaining matches since the team is currently sitting in 4th place and cannot afford to drop any more ground. The glasses guy speaks up and says that starting from the very next game, he is going to make it his personal focus to deal with number 1, and that Giongo really needs to get himself back into proper shape before then. Another guy then leans in close and quietly asks him whether it is actually true that he has been going around spreading rumors about the short freshman giving him the cold shoulder and ignoring him. The glasses guy fires back and says that it is not a rumor at all and that Jinsu genuinely does ignore him, adding that the other guy really should have seen the look in Jinsu's eyes and that he probably just came across as grumpy to him. The other guy then suggests that the whole thing could easily just come down to jealousy on the glasses guy's part, pointing out that Jinsu is actually better than him when it comes to playing the same position, which would naturally make things feel a little uncomfortable. On top of that, the glasses guy starts wondering out loud whether any of the freshmen are around, but the other guy questions whether the freshmen would even want to sit and have dinner with them when they could be out somewhere having a much better time. The glasses guy then turns to Jae-woo and asks if he let the younger kids know that they are all having dinner together, to which Jae-woo simply replies that he completely forgot to tell them. Yoongjin then asks Sichin if they could talk outside for a bit. When they gets outside, Yoongjin tells him that it seems no one likes the fact that the glasses guy is the president, so he is curious on how he keeps the position. Sichin says that when he joined last year, he was already the president. He also says that their club never received proper support because they lack behind the soccer club and other clubs, but Woo Jin, the glasses guy, is well connected even with the school staff. He also says that they started to get a lot of support after he returned to school and he was close with the club seniors too, so he naturally became the president. Sichin also mentions that Woo Jin is honestly a really great person at the end of the day, even if his basketball skills leave a lot to be desired. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a guy is heading out with the same girl from match day named Yangju, and he asks her if the two of them could grab some drinks together that night. Yangju does not hesitate and pulls out her phone to call Jinsu and get him to come join them. However, Jinsu is already in the middle of eating out with his own group of friends and tells her that drinking will have to wait for another day since he is tied up right now. Jinsu's friends happen to catch bits of the conversation, and the moment they realize he is on the phone with a girl, they completely lose it and start going wild about it. They waste no time teasing and mocking him about it in the way that only close friends really do. After they finish eating, Jinsu's friends bring up the basketball club and ask him to give them the rundown on what the club president is actually like, and Jinsu does not hold back at all, telling them straight up that he is a total coward and an absolutely terrible player on top of that. One of Jinsu's other friends then throws out the idea that they should all head out of town together this coming weekend to go play a match somewhere outside the city. At the same time, a guy named Suk approaches the president, and Woo Jin gets surprised to see him. Suk tells him that a junior sent him a footage from today's game and asks where Jinsu went. Woo Jin tells him that he left early because he was hurt, which annoys Suk because he came here only to meet him. Suk then asks him why wasn't Jinsu the starting member and why were he the starting member. Woo Jin responds by saying that the reason is simply because Jinsu is too young and does not have enough experience yet to be relied on at this level. Suk however pushes back on that and says that Jinsu did not come across as inexperienced at all out there, pointing out that his fundamentals and groundwork were really solid, and that when it comes to picking players for a match, the decision should be based purely on how well a player actually performs rather than anything else. Suk then gets a little more direct with Woo Jin and tells him straight up that he himself should have been sitting out that match because he was out there playing like a complete clown the whole time. Suk also drops the information that he is now officially a part of Team Drive, explaining that certain circumstances came up that forced him to make the switch over from his previous team. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, Jinsu's friends are all having a great time together at the karaoke club without a care in the world, while Jinsu himself is feeling really on edge and is going back and forth in his head about whether he should come clean to them about the fact that he is thinking about leaving the club. As he makes his way down the hallway lost in his own thoughts, he happens to glance into one of the rooms and notices both Youngju and Yeonjin inside together. The next morning, Jinsu and his friend head out together and get into a conversation with each other as they walk. Jinsu lets his friend know that he is planning on skipping class for the day. His friend then brings up that a guy named Kim Lear is on his way back to Korea, and once he is back they can all get together and play basketball on Saturday. Hearing that, Jinsu gets really excited and finds himself hoping that Saturday gets here as fast as possible. Saturday eventually rolls around and a group of guys gather out at the court, and one of them mentions to the others that he actually ran into Jinsu in the club room recently since the two of them happen to be in the same club, and that he asked Jinsu whether he is planning on playing with Team Drive on Saturday. Jinsu however responded in a pretty cold and detached way, saying that he was not really sure about it. After that, Team Drive gets to work practicing out on the court, and Sayaka turns to Woo Jin and asks whether they have an electric scoreboard available to use, to which Woo Jin replies that they actually got one from the faculty back the previous year and still have it. Right around that same time, the opposing team that is set to go up against Team Drive makes their arrival at the school and shows up ready to play. When the opposing team steps onto the court, all the Drive players immediately take notice and think to themselves that not only do these guys look really good, but they also seem to be pretty young on top of that. Some of the players even find themselves wondering why they went ahead and wrote their team name down as Drive on the registration form instead of something that makes more sense. Another player takes it a step further and thinks that they must have just put down a fake name on the form, because the team standing in front of them is clearly not some random squad called Drive that is without a doubt the Drive. The player then lets his mind wander a little further and thinks about how Jinsu would probably be pretty shocked if he ever found out that he is about to go up against his own group of friends in this very match. Woo Jin then speaks up and says that this actually explains everything and makes it totally clear why Jinsu is nowhere to be seen right now, figuring that Jinsu must have stayed away on purpose because he did not want to find himself in the position of having to play against the people he is close with. However, the other guy pushes back on that and points out that they only ever knew this team by the name Drive, which means Jinsu would have had absolutely no way of knowing that the team he was going to be facing was actually made up of his own friends. Jinsu's friends meanwhile are standing around looking confused and wondering out loud where all the managers are and when exactly the match is going to get started. Just then, one of the Drive players walks over to them and lets them know that they will be kicking things off after a 10-minute warm-up period. During that break, Jinsu's friends gather together and start getting themselves organized and setting up their positions ahead of the match. After everything settles, the match between Drive and Drive finally gets underway with Team Drive getting possession of the ball first, and they start moving it around between themselves with smooth and confident passing until it eventually finds its way to Jinsu's friend, who wastes no time and puts it up for an easy score without much resistance at all. After that, the ball switches over to Gyeongo on Drive's side, and he quickly moves it along to one of his teammates, who then puts in a real effort trying to hold back Jinsu's friend and keep him from getting to where he wants to go on the court. Despite the effort being put in to stop him, Jinsu's friend manages to find a way past the defender and goes ahead and puts the score up anyway. The match keeps rolling along from there and the ball eventually makes its way into the hands of one of Team Drive's players, and after a bit of movement it finds its way to the blonde guy on Team Drive, who makes it look incredibly easy as he puts up the score without breaking much of a sweat. Meanwhile, the glasses guy is standing there racking his brain trying to figure out who exactly the guy is that Jinsu had mentioned to him earlier before the match, but as the game keeps going and he watches things unfold more carefully, it slowly starts clicking and he comes to the realization that the person Jinsu was talking about this whole time is actually none other than Woo Jin. After that, the blonde-haired guy takes off toward the basket with the ball in his hands, and right as he leaps up to release it, Woo Jin suddenly appears right in front of him trying to stop him. However, due to the blonde guy's overwhelming physical strength, the impact sends Woo Jin crashing straight down onto the ground. Right at that moment, Jinsu shows up out of nowhere and everyone is genuinely shocked to see him standing there because nobody really expected him to actually show up at all. One of the guys turns to Jinsu and asks him if he is surprised to see that his friends are all here, but Jinsu calmly replies that he already knew they were going to be there and that none of it is catching him off guard at all. Another guy then tries to hurry Jinsu along and tells him to get ready since they are just about to get the game started, but Jinsu stops him right there and straight up lets him know that he will not be suiting up and playing on their team anymore going forward. Without wasting another second, Jinsu suddenly strips off his jacket to reveal that he is switching sides entirely and is now going to be lining up and playing for Team Drive's opposing side, and the revelation completely catches everyone off guard and leaves them all stunned and struggling to make sense of what they are actually seeing unfold right in front of them. One of Drive's players is left standing there with a thoroughly confused look spread across his face, genuinely unable to wrap his head around why Jinsu is suddenly not going to be out there on their side of the court anymore like absolutely everyone had just naturally assumed he would be. The red-headed guy turns to Jaewoo and asks him what exactly is going on, and Jaewoo breaks it down for him and explains how Jinsu is now going to be suiting up and playing for the other team instead. On the other side of things, Jinsu pulls the blonde guy aside and tells him that they should just stick with their usual defensive setup, and that even if it feels a little early in the game to go all out, they should go ahead and completely suffocate Drive right from the very start and not give them any room to breathe. Team Drive is visibly shaken the moment they see a full man-to-man defense being set up right in front of them, and the reason it is hitting them this hard is most likely because they have not put in a single minute of practice when it comes to figuring out how to break through and beat a man-to-man defensive scheme. The match gets going and Jinsu wastes absolutely no time at all, immediately reading the situation and picking the ball clean off straight from Woojin's hands before pushing forward and converting it into a quick and effortless score for his new team, making it look completely easy right from the very first possession. The girls ask the Drive player why Jinsu is playing on the other team, and the guy tells him that it's Jinsu's original plan. He also tells them that he won't be playing in their club anymore. On the other hand, the other team's boys also wonder what Jinsu thinking, and one of them mentions that Jinsu expressions changed when he learned who he was playing against. They think that it looked like Jinsu always wanted to go against Team Drive. The match then continues with Woojin having the ball and he is going man-to-man against Jinsu. Seeing that, one of the boys remembers the same defense that Jinsu used with him the other day. Woojin then tries his best to get rid of Jinsu, but before he could do something, another teammate of his tells him to pass the ball over. Woojin tries to shake things up by faking a pass and pushing forward with the ball, but out of absolutely nowhere Jinsu reads the whole thing perfectly and steps in to intercept it before Woojin even realizes what is happening. The ball then finds its way back over to one of Woojin's teammates, who moves it along quickly to Minsik, and Minsik goes ahead and launches it up toward the basket, giving it his best shot. However, the ball comes bouncing right back off the rim and ends up getting picked up by one of Jinsu's friends on the other end. The match then picks right back up with Jinsu getting his hands on the ball and pushing forward confidently until he gets right up alongside his blonde-haired friend, at which point he slides the ball back over to him with perfect timing at exactly the right moment. The blonde-haired guy then finishes the whole play off really cleanly by putting the ball straight into the basket and getting the score to go up for their side. Watching the whole thing play out from where he is standing, Suk takes a good look at what just happened and thinks to himself that the yellow-haired guy is not only seriously quick on his feet but also has a remarkably sharp eye when it comes to spotting passing opportunities way before most other players on the court would even begin to notice them opening up. Next up, Woojin gets possession of the ball and this time he goes in with the mindset that he is going to find a way to break through, even though deep down he knows that there is really not much he can do when Jinsu is the one standing in his way. Minsik then battles his way past a couple of defenders and calls out loudly to Woojin to get the ball over to him, but Woojin just ends up freezing up and struggling to make any kind of decisive move. Rather than committing to a pass in either direction, Woojin just heaves the ball up toward the basket on his own, and just like usual it bounces right back off without going in. The ball then finds its way to Jinsu, who sizes up the situation and decides to just go for it himself. Jinsu then blows right past Woojin like he is barely even there and puts the score up with ease, leaving everyone around completely stunned by how effortless he made it look. The first quarter ends up going really smoothly overall thanks to Jinsu's strong performance throughout, and right before the buzzer sounds to end the quarter, Woojin forces up yet another desperate shot. After that, Suk gets himself ready to step into the game, but Jinsu finds himself looking over at him, wondering who this guy actually is since he has never seen him around before. Another guy on the sideline has the same question and turns to Jae-woo to ask him about Suk as well, so Jae-woo fills him in and explains that he is one of the seniors who used to play on alt. The guy then follows up and asks why he would be out here playing on Drive if he is supposed to be on alt, and Jae-woo explains that Suk simply wanted to spend his final year of college playing alongside Drive before everything wraps up for him. Meanwhile, the girl from before makes her way over to Jinsu and gets straight to the point, asking him whether it is actually true that he is planning on leaving the club for real. Jinsu takes a moment and then finally comes clean, confirming that he is indeed leaving the club, which visibly hits the girl hard and makes her even more upset as she asks him why he would go ahead and make a decision like that without saying a single word to anyone else about it beforehand. Jinsu explains that he was planning on bringing it up to her later, but also points out that since they are in the same conference, he can still stay connected and be around them separately even after leaving. At that same moment, one of the other Drive players pulls Suk aside and starts telling him a bit about Team Drive, mentioning that there is a massive amateur competition that gets held every single year and that this team actually managed to come in second place in it. He also mentions that the blonde guy in that team was the top scorer in the competition. After that, the second quarter gets underway and right away it is noticeable that the blonde guy is sitting this one out and not taking part in the match. Suk takes one look at the situation and thinks to himself that since the blonde guy is not out there on the court, he is not going to have to push himself all that hard this quarter. The ball ends up in Woojin's hands and he gives it everything he has, trying to work his way toward the basket and get a shot off, but because of how short he is, the ball just does not have the angle it needs to drop inside and ends up bouncing right back off. Eventually the ball makes its way over to Jinsu, and as he surveys everything happening around him, he thinks to himself that Team Drive's overall strategy is actually not too bad and has some decent ideas behind it, but there is one massive problem that is impossible to ignore, and that problem is Wu Jin, who keeps showing up as a weak spot that the whole team is built around. Jinsu then takes off and weaves his way past a whole bunch of defenders before firing off a pass to one of his friends at just the right time, and his friend converts it into a clean score for the team without any trouble. During the second run of plays, the ball finds its way back to Jinsu once again, and this time he smoothly gets past Wu Jin and catches everyone completely off guard by putting up a perfectly executed floater shot that drops right in and scores the point. Meanwhile, Jinsu's friends are standing on the sidelines watching everything unfold and start wondering out loud why Jinsu is going so hard and overdoing it the way he is, since it is pretty obvious to all of them that he is out there getting some kind of revenge, and they figure that his seniors are probably going to have some things to say to him about it afterward. One of the Drive players watching from his side of things thinks to himself that even though Wu Jin's defensive skills are genuinely terrible, the timing and speed that is being used against him is really something that goes way beyond what you would ever expect to see at an amateur level. The match picks right back up and Jinsu comes charging hard straight toward Wu Jin, who is currently holding onto the ball and trying to figure out his next move. Minsik spots an opening and shouts over to Wu Jin, telling him to get the ball over to him right now since he is standing in a really good position to do something with it, but Wu Jin completely tunes him out and acts like he did not hear a single word. The referee then steps in and calls out to Jinsu's friend, who is in the middle of blocking Minsik, warning him to watch himself because of the 3-second rule. The 3-second rule basically means that if an attacking player stays inside the paint zone for longer than 3 seconds, the ball automatically gets handed over to the opposing team as a violation. In a move that nobody really sees coming, Wu Jin actually decides to go ahead and pass the ball over to Minsik after all, and Minsik wastes no time turning to Wu Jin and asking him straight up why he did not just pass it when he called for it the first time. On top of that, Minsik also asks him point blank whether he has any idea just how many turnovers he has been responsible for causing throughout the course of this match. Wu Jin's mind suddenly drifts back to the past, where he finds himself remembering a time when he was out on the court playing alongside Minsik, and back in those days everyone around him was full of praise for how well he played and how much they could genuinely count on him to deliver when it mattered. Back to the present, Wu Jin pushes himself and takes off running after Jinsu, and as he runs he thinks to himself about how much he has always loved basketball, more than pretty much anyone else around him, and how back when he was just a freshman he used to show up earlier than every single other person just to get his preparations done before anyone else even arrived. His seniors took a real liking to him during that time, and his skills on the court kept growing and improving to the point where he was told that he would be stepping up as a starting member the following year, which felt like everything he had been working toward was finally paying off. But then a year later, a freshman came along and took that spot right out from under him, and things were never quite the same after that. Back in the present, Wu Jin throws himself in front of the basket and leaps up in a desperate attempt to get in the way and block whatever shot Jinsu is about to put up. But Jinsu simply releases another shot that cuts right through the air and finds the bottom of the basket with ease, making it look completely effortless. The force of everything sends Wu Jin crashing hard down onto the ground, and he ends up injuring his leg in the process. After that, everyone rushes over toward Wu Jin to check on him and see how bad it is, and they notice that Jinsu, who is standing right there beside him, is not doing anything to help at all and just stays completely still. Wu Jin tells everyone that he thinks he sprained it worse than he initially thought it was, which makes the situation a bit more serious than it first appeared. Suk then turns to Jiango and tells him to go ahead and help Wu Jin out and get somebody else ready to come in and fill his spot on the court. Jae-woo then looks over at Yeonjun and tells him to get in there and play, but Yeonjun pushes back and says that he is doing just fine on the sideline and suggests that Jae-woo should be the one going in instead since he has not had a single chance to play yet throughout the whole match. Yeonjun ultimately makes the decision to go ahead and step onto the court anyway, mainly because he knows that Jae-woo is going to want to be fresh and available to play in the next game coming up. The match gets going again, and right away Jinsu is already thinking to himself that running a man-to-man defense does not really make as much sense anymore now that Wu Jin is no longer out there on the court. The ball gets moving around among the Drive players as they keep cycling it from one person to the next, and it eventually finds its way over to Suk. He thinks to himself that it has genuinely been a while since the ball last came his way, and as he looks up and reads the court he notices straight away that the distance between him and the basket is way too much to work with comfortably. Suk then manages to slip past one of the Drive players, and in almost no time at all he blows right by Jinsu's friends and launches the ball up toward the basket. However, before it can find its way inside, it gets tipped and comes down to Minsik, who quickly moves it back over to Suk without hesitating. Suk thinks to himself that he had originally come out here planning to just sit back and watch Wu Jin play today, but there is absolutely no way he can just stand around and do nothing anymore given how the situation is unfolding. Suk finds himself really wanting the blonde guy to get himself onto the court because the way he sees it, if he does not come in soon then their team is going to end up getting absolutely crushed before things are said and done. After that, Suk takes off and glides past a whole bunch of the opposing team's players like they are barely even there and gets the ball up toward the basket with confidence. Jinsu watches the whole thing and suddenly realizes that Suk is actually left-handed, which genuinely surprises him because he had just naturally assumed he was right-handed the whole time given how smooth and effortless his right side breakthrough looked and the fact that his fakes are on a completely different level from what you would normally expect to see. On the other side of things, one of the players comes over to Wu Jin with a spray for his injury and asks him whether they should go ahead and call an ambulance for him. Wu Jin tells him straight up that he does not need any of that. Meanwhile, Wu Jin turns to Jiango and asks him straight up whether he actually finds basketball fun, and Jiango responds without any hesitation that it is absolutely fun for him and that the only reason he keeps pushing himself to play and get better is simply because of how much he genuinely enjoys it. Wu Jin then cuts him off and tells him bluntly that he should really start thinking about looking for a job instead since he has not exactly accomplished much of anything worth noting. He goes on to say that rather than sticking around and wasting his time out here, it would honestly be better for Jiango to just walk away from basketball altogether and move on with his life. On top of that, Wu Jin also makes it clear that Jiango is simply not on a path that is ever going to lead him to becoming a professional player no matter how hard he tries. Meanwhile, one of Jinsu's friends is standing there with a nagging feeling that he has seen Suk somewhere before but just cannot quite place it. The guy points out that putting aside how Suk looks, the kind of fake that Jinsu pulled off out there is not something that is easy to do by any stretch, but after watching Suk in action he is becoming more and more convinced that Suk is definitely someone he has come across before. After the match, Suk walks over to Jinsu and asks him whether it is actually true that he is planning on leaving the club, and Jinsu confirms that it is. Suk then tries to set up a bet with him, telling him that if their team wins then Jinsu has to come back and rejoin the club, but Jinsu shuts it down immediately and says that he is not interested in making any kind of bet. Outside the gym, Minsik happens to run into Jiango and asks him what is going on with Wu Jin, and Jiango shifts uncomfortably and hesitates, clearly finding it difficult to explain the whole situation to him. Back out on the court, Jinsu's friends pull him aside and let him know that everything out there feels completely different from what he had described to them beforehand, pointing out that aside from the red-haired guy, the two players positioned under the goalpost are actually really solid and not someone you can just brush off easily. Meanwhile, outside the court, a group of girls are hanging around and getting into a conversation about what it is that got them into liking basketball in the first place. As the conversation keeps flowing, it naturally drifts away from basketball and shifts over toward the topic of boys, and they start curiously wondering out loud about who each of them has a crush on. One of the girls then turns to another and brings up Jinsu, asking her about what it is like going to the same school as both Jinsu and Yeonjun and what she thinks of them. Back on the court, the match picks right back up with Jinsu getting his hands on the ball and sliding it back over to his friends, and from there they get into a really smooth passing rhythm that keeps the ball moving around cleanly until it eventually ends up finding its way into the basket. One of the drive players then launches the ball so far down the court that Suk barely manages to chase it down and get his hands on it in time. Without overthinking it, Suk makes up his mind right then and there to go ahead and attempt a three-pointer, figuring that this is honestly where he feels the most confident and comfortable when it comes to his own game. Suk's shot finds its way into the basket, and the ball then gets into the hands of the blonde guy who immediately takes off pushing forward down the court. He then launches the ball straight into the basket and gets some much-needed points on the board for his team. The ball next finds its way over to Suk, who has it in his head that they are going to push the pace and attack quickly, but before he can get going he finds himself getting shut down and blocked. Rather than letting that stop him, he goes ahead and fires the ball straight toward the basket anyway and manages to get it in. Jinsu watches all of this and starts feeling genuinely nervous, thinking to himself that even though there is still a pretty big gap in the score, if they let their guard down for even a second this team could absolutely start closing in on them, and that they need to start treating this like it is a completely fresh and brand new game from this point forward. The blonde-haired guy then turns to Jinsu and asks him whether he can handle staying on that particular person and locking him down. Jinsu thinks it over and tells him that they should go ahead and run the box and one method to deal with the situation. The match gets back underway with the blonde-haired guy coming face to face with Suk, and he goes ahead and lets Suk know straight up that they are planning to run the box and one method against him. The blonde-haired guy then reads exactly what the opposing team's defense is setting up to do and wastes no time reacting by cutting sharply to the other side of the court, with Suk hustling right behind him trying his best to stay glued to him. Jinsu spots the opening and fires a quick pass over to him, and the blonde guy catches it and gets it up and into the basket without any trouble. As the third quarter gets going and plays out, Suk and the blonde guy end up going back and forth trading baskets with each other, and when it comes to the actual scoring difference throughout the third quarter, the two teams are pretty much dead even and neither side is able to pull ahead of the other by any significant margin. What really stands out during this stretch is that the drive team from the business department is looking really alive and energized, with all kinds of creative passing plays flowing naturally out of the breakthroughs that Suk keeps creating and opening up for everyone around him. Now the third quarter is winding all the way down to its final moments under an incredibly intense and electric atmosphere that has everyone completely locked in. The blonde-haired guy gets his hands on the ball and goes up for what looks like it could be a clean basket, but right as he jumps to release the shot, Suk comes in and makes contact with him, and the referee immediately calls it as a foul. Watching all of this from the sideline, Jiango finds himself thinking that without Wu Jin out there on the court, the two teams are actually playing a really complete and beautiful brand of basketball together, and it hits him that this is exactly the kind of basketball he has always wanted to be a part of and has been longing to play all along. During the break, one of the guys comes over to Jiango and offers to switch positions with him since he is feeling like he needs to take a little breather and rest up for a bit. Siako then turns to Jiango and tells him straight that they are all amateurs out here and nobody is sitting around expecting anyone to be draining shots left and right, especially not from him specifically. He then adds that when you really get down to it, basketball is ultimately all about 5 people working together and moving as one unit just to create the right opportunity for one person to get a clean shot off, and that when that chance finally presents itself, it would honestly be a complete waste and almost criminal to not take it. Jinsu's other friend then turns to the black-haired guy and asks him what it actually feels like to be out there going up against the other team the way he is. The black-haired guy thinks about it for a moment and replies that even though it is genuinely really tough and pushing him to his limits, he is still having an absolute ton of fun with every single second of it. The fourth quarter then gets underway and the defensive setup is still the box and one, staying consistent with what they had been running before the break. During this stretch, the blonde-haired guy whose real name turns out to be Lear is finding it increasingly difficult to keep up with Suk and match his energy and movement. Suk is shooting better and better as the quarter goes on, managing to chip away at the gap and bring the difference all the way down to just 18 points, while Lear's body is clearly starting to feel the toll of constantly trying to shake off Suk's relentless defense as the fatigue keeps building up on him. Jinsu decides to make Lear stay at the corner because it's going to be hard to attack in his tired state. Lear gets right up in Suk's face and tells him straight that he has been through plenty of grueling endurance matches going up against high school students before, but he will openly admit that Suk is genuinely one of the toughest opponents he has had to deal with in a long time. The match gets back going with Suk blowing past Lear like it is nothing and moving the ball over to Jiango, who then puts up a shot toward the basket, and with a helpful screen from Minsik the ball manages to find its way in. The match keeps rolling along with Jinsu working the ball into the low post from a 45-degree angle while Sangwoo cuts sharply through a screen set by Lim Hyuk coming from a wide high post position. Sangwoo then uses his combination of height and speed to his advantage and gets an easy score while the defense is left completely turned around and confused about what just happened. As this plan keeps working out exactly the way it was drawn up, the score difference stretches back out to 20 points once again giving their side a comfortable cushion. Suk keeps doing what he does best by knocking down three-pointers and breaking through the defense, but because the opposing side keeps getting caught falling for the exact same moves over and over again, the gap stubbornly stays right around 22 points and refuses to close any further. Then out of nowhere, Lear pulls off a perfectly executed dunk that brings another point onto the board for his team and leaves everyone watching genuinely surprised by the play. Team Drive then takes the first out of 3 matches with 70-46 and Suk asks Jinsu if he wants to make another bet. Jinsu and his friends head out talking about how tough it was during the match. Jinsu's friend then wonders if Team Drive really plays for 3 hours usually without taking a break and Jinsu says that Suk's endurance was something else. Jinsu's friend then asks Jiango about Wu Jin as he haven't seen him for a while so he replies that he went to the hospital. Jiango then asks him about his experience with the first match, and he says that it was so much fun. The following morning, Jinsu's female friend asks him if they could walk home together but he straight away tells her that he is already going with his friends. The girl mentions that they are all heading in the same direction, but Jinsu tells her that there are just too many of them to all walk together and that she should just go on ahead without them. Jinsu then grabs his friend and the two of them head off together in their own direction. As they walk, Jinsu brings up that the guy who was standing next to Youngju is clearly into her, but Jinsu's friend fires back and says that he wants to be the one to date her himself since he thinks she is really pretty. Right at that moment, one of the other guys pulls Jinsu aside and tells him that he should think carefully about Suk because there is a real possibility that Suk might actually already know who he is. Jinsu brushes it off and says that as far as he is concerned it was the very first time he had ever laid eyes on the guy, but his friends push back on that and try to fill him in on some information that they happen to know about Suk that Jinsu might not be aware of. Meanwhile, on a completely different side of things, Suk is making his way over to the hospital to go visit someone, and as he walks, he is in the middle of a phone call with his mother, talking to her along the way. Later that night, Suk receives a call from Jaewoo who asks him if he can play in tomorrow's match as the league schedule has been changed. Hearing that, Suk gets surprised and asks why this happened all of a sudden. Jaewoo says that he just received a call from Woojin and the league schedule was suddenly adjusted. Suk then asks him who they are playing against, so Jaewoo says that it's Team Gong, which is not a strong team according to Suk. He then asks Jaewoo if he is the only person who can get in touch with Woojin, and Jaewoo says that it's just him and Jeongo and he will tell him more about it tomorrow. The next day, everyone gathers together out at the field where Jaewoo steps up and lets the group know that since the club is currently in need of a chairman, Woojin had told him to go ahead and take on that role himself, so he is going to be serving as chairman on a temporary basis until they get around to choosing a proper new one. Suk cannot help himself and throws out a sarcastic remark, saying that he had no idea that on top of being a terrible basketball player, Woojin also turned out to be irresponsible on top of everything else. Suk then turns to Jaewoo and asks whether Jinsu is going to make it in time for the match, but Jaewoo tells him that the reason Jinsu is running late is because he forgot his uniform at home and had to go back for it. Meanwhile, over on the completely other side of things, the players of Team Gong are also all gathered together and having a pretty deep and focused conversation amongst themselves about their upcoming match against Drive and what kind of game plan and overall strategy they are going to bring into it when the time comes. Team Gong's leader Changseep gets things going by pointing out to the group that in their last match they let a really good fast break opportunity slip right through their fingers and ended up losing all of their momentum because of it, which is something they absolutely cannot afford to let happen again. The team keeps the conversation going as everyone starts opening up and sharing their thoughts and opinions about the various weaknesses that showed up during their last performance and what needs to be cleaned up before they go into this next one. A little later on, Changseep happens to look over at Team Drive and his eyes go wide with shock when he spots Suk standing there among the players, and it immediately hits him that with Suk on their roster, winning this match is not going to be anywhere near as straightforward as he might have thought going in. Changseep then looks a little closer and recognizes Jeongo in the group as well, and he heads over and greets him warmly, telling him that they finally get the chance to go head-to-head against each other for real. On the other side of things, Suk is absolutely losing his mind with frustration because he has just found out that the freshmen are not going to be showing up to play in this match at all. Sometime later, Youngjae finds Jinsu outside and asks him why he didn't go to the game. Before hearing for a response, she straight away asks him another question that what middle school did he come from. Meanwhile, Jinsu's friend also arrives at the court to ask about the match and Jaewoo tells him that they finished the first quarter. Suk then allows another boy to play but Jinsu's friend asks Suk about his turn, so he says that he should wait just a bit and he can play after they score a little more. Deep down, Suk wonders that if his intuition is right, they don't even have the basic skills and he can tell that all of them, except for one, just started playing basketball. The second quarter starts off with the opposite team having the ball and due to a terrible pass of one of the player, they completely ruins the game for themselves. 5 minutes later in the second quarter, Suk scores additional 10 points in the second quarter, totaling up to 16. On the other hand, Gong couldn't initiate a proper attack due to the continuous turnovers and thanks to Suk's performance, Sichin also scores 4 points, widening the gap to 38 by 8 score points. The match continues with one of the player passing terribly non-stop that makes Jeongo wonder why he is doing that. Suk figures out that Changseep is trying to get his teammates more involved and get them touching the ball more frequently throughout the game. He then turns to one of his own teammates and tells him to just keep feeding him the ball for the time being, explaining that if they can stretch the score gap out far enough, then the players sitting on the bench are going to get their chance to come in and play some minutes as well. Suk then gets his hands on the ball and scores so quickly and so effortlessly that it catches absolutely everyone off guard, pushing Drive's total all the way up to 40 points just like that. One of the players from the other team then turns to the referee and asks if he can go ahead and call a timeout, explaining that they do not have anyone sitting on the bench to sub in right now. The referee grants them the timeout and during that break, the entire team gathers around Changsip and every single one of them tells him to just go ahead and do whatever he feels is right out there on the court because no matter what happens they are all going to have his back and support him through it. Changsip takes a moment to think it all over quietly before speaking up and telling them that there really is no point in one person trying to carry a basketball game all on their own, adding that everyone on the team is actually doing really well out there and that he himself is not even that great of a player when it really comes down to it. 6 years ago, Changsip finds a notice board about basketball club named Alt and decides to join it. Changsip had high expectations when he joined, but in the end he had to do all the chores being a bench warmer during the game. Sometimes he would play when the score difference was huge, but as he kept making mistakes due to the pressure from the seniors, they would criticize him all the time, making him feel down. However, the moment he saw a senior who was worse than him playing as a starting member, he made his mind to quit. Alt Changsip then goes back to the court to think that there is nowhere else to play basketball anymore. He wonders about buying a ball first and leave it in a locker. Changsip then finds a freshman walking down the court and the freshman turns out to be Woo Jin who is carrying some bags. Woo Jin then continues to practice on the court and Changsip thinks that his passion is amazing because it's not even practice time yet and he is still training. Changsip then asks him if he could borrow a ball as he is going to return it after practice. Woo Jin then says that it's boring to play alone, so he asks him if he would like to join him. From that point on, the number of people applying to join the club stayed pretty low, which actually worked out in his favor since it meant he could jump straight in and start playing alongside Drive without much waiting around at all. Even though he was not able to get out there and participate in the official league during that first year, he still had a genuinely wonderful and memorable time throughout the whole thing, and when second year came around, that is right when he ended up crossing paths with Jiango for the very first time. As it turns out, Woo Jin had always been really open and vocal about the fact that if he ever found himself in the position of becoming president of the club one day, his whole vision and dream for it was to build the kind of place where absolutely everyone who walked through the door could come in and have a genuinely good time playing basketball together, and that this would be true regardless of how old someone was or what kind of skill level they happened to be at when they showed up. After completing his military service and taking a brief leave of absence to get himself sorted out, Changsip came back to school at the age of 24, and after going around and getting the support and approval of a handful of professors and people he knew, he somehow managed to pull off getting some of the seniors that Sango had been close with to come on board, even though he was the only member at the very start and had basically nothing to work with. After that whole process of getting things off the ground, Changsip and those seniors ended up sharing a really fun and memorable stretch of time together, just enjoying everything that came with it, and looking back on it all he genuinely cannot even begin to imagine what his life would have looked like or what he would have been doing with himself if those people had never come into his life the way they did. Back in the present, with 4 minutes still left on the clock, Drive had made two key promises to each other during the timeout that they are now putting into action out on the court. The first one revolves around Sook's fast break attacking game, and it is becoming really clear just how much of an impact he is having on the match with every single possession, essentially carrying the entire team on his back almost single-handedly, and even Changsip on the other side finds himself thinking that Sook's hang time and balance in the air are on a completely different level, which is really no surprise given who he is and what he is capable of. The second thing Drive committed to during the timeout was to put pressure on the ball handler immediately after a score goes in, which in practice means that Sook is going to be getting right up in the face of the opposing players as soon as they get the ball, and that includes Changsip himself, who is already not feeling particularly confident or comfortable when it comes to handling the ball under pressure in tight situations. Changsip then manages to find a way past Sook and get some separation, and all of the Drive players immediately take off running after him, with at least one of them thinking to himself that whatever else you want to say about Changsip, the guy can at least handle his dribble really well when he needs to. One of the Drive players then thinks through the situation and figures that the best play is to use Minsik to cut him off and block his path, reasoning that they have the height advantage in that matchup and that if they can get a hand on the shot and block it cleanly, they might actually be able to turn things around and create something meaningful out of it. Surprisingly, Changsip throws a floater shot that goes straight inside the basket. The match then continues with Sook going man-to-man with Changsip. The same defense continues for Changsip as Gong couldn't even do a proper attack and allowed Drive to continue scoring easily until the end of the second quarter. The match picks right back up with one of the Drive players pushing forward with the ball, and as he surveys the court he thinks to himself that with everyone bunched up and crowded together the way they are, there has got to be someone out there who is not being marked at all. He then spots the opening and fires the ball over to Jinsu's friend, who catches it and goes up for a jump shot that flies perfectly straight into the basket and bumps Team Drive's score all the way up to 64. However, right after that, Jinsu's friend loses his focus and lets his concentration slip just long enough for Changsip to read the situation, swoop in, and steal the ball clean away before going ahead and converting it into a score for his own team without breaking a sweat. After that, one of Drive's players gets possession of the ball and calmly tells everyone around him to dial things back and take it slow since it is their turn to be on the attack now and there is no need to rush anything. He then moves the ball along to one of his teammates, who spots his opportunity and quickly launches the ball up toward the basket in one swift motion. One of the opposing players gets a hand on the ball while it is still up in the air trying to knock it away, but despite that effort the ball still somehow finds its way inside the basket and the score counts anyway. Changsip then turns to his teammate right away and tells him straight up not to let his focus slip for even a single second, making it clear that he is going to do absolutely whatever it takes to get revenge for what just happened. Changsip then gets the ball and he manages to run past Drive's players easily that made a player of Drive fall on the ground. Changsip gets the ball up and into the basket while one of the Drive players gets so desperate trying to stop him that he ends up grabbing onto his hair in the process, which the referee immediately calls as a foul. The referee then looks straight at the player and warns him that if he pulls something like that one more time he is going to be sent off the court completely. Suk then turns to the referee and calls for a timeout, while on the other side Jaewoo walks over to the player who grabbed Changsip's hair and firmly tells him that he needs to go ahead and apologize to him for what he did. One of the other team's players is already visibly frustrated and cannot understand why the freshmen seem to be looking down on them the way they are, and he wonders what is going on with all the rough and dirty plays that keep happening out there. The Drive player who committed the foul then speaks up and explains that he is still pretty new to basketball and that he is just not a naturally gifted athlete in general, so he genuinely feels terrible about the whole thing and did not mean for any of it to happen the way it did. Changsip then turns to him and tells him that it is completely fine and that he does not need to beat himself up over it since it was pretty clear that it was not intentional at all. During the timeout, Suk gathers his players together and does not hold back, telling them straight up to stop fooling around out there and to make absolutely sure they are not looking down on or underestimating anyone they are playing against. The match keeps going and Changsip successfully converts his additional free throws and also comes away with possession of the ball after drawing a foul from the opposing side. For anyone who does not know, this particular type of foul works in a way where if a player gets hit with a foul, the team on the receiving end gets awarded 2 free throws, but if the shot that was being attempted at the time of the foul actually went in, then the player receives 1 extra free throw on top of that along with full possession of the ball as well. After getting all of that sorted out, Gong keeps their attacking momentum going at a really strong pace with Changsip pulling out his floater shots repeatedly and managing to get them to drop in cleanly each time without too much resistance. Eventually the ball makes its way back over to Team Drive's side and they do their best to keep things alive by moving the ball around through passing, but no matter what they try the ball somehow keeps finding its way right back to Changsip as if he has a magnet on him. Suk stands on the sideline watching the whole situation play out and thinks to himself that it is honestly such a frustrating shame that Drive does not have even one solid and dependable guard on their entire roster to speak of. Changsip then pulls his teammates together and tells them clearly that from this moment on they need to switch over to a man-to-man strategy and make absolutely certain that they are not giving the other team even the smallest window to get their hands on the ball. He also reasons to himself that this change should genuinely make things a whole lot more manageable for everyone on his side including himself, given that Drive's guard is clearly really vulnerable and struggles badly when put in a straight-up one-on-one situation. The ball then gets to Team Drive's player and he goes man-to-man with Changsip, thinking that there is no need for him to be scared. He then tries his best to break through but that doesn't work. He then passes the ball to Jinsu's friend, but the ball gets quickly intercepted by opposite team player. Eventually, the ball gets to Changsip who scores points for his team by throwing the ball in the basket. At that moment, Changsip feels that he can confidently answer to anyone who tries to question his college life. He feels that his entire life has changed ever since he met his team and that is the reason he is giving it his best. The match then gets to a certain point where Team Drive is almost winning and Changsip approaches Suk, saying he knows that he is Sunny from Alt. After that, the match continues with both teams giving their 100% and in the end, Team Drive officially wins the match. Changsip then approaches Jiango and says that he did a good job and how Woo Jin made the team that he always talked about. Before leaving, Changsip tells him to tell Woo Jin that he envies him. However, Jiango thinks that if Woo Jin saw today's match he would have been jealous of him, even if he didn't show it. Meanwhile the people who were watching that match LSO thinks that Changsip was not only cool but his score was also quite high. After the match was uploaded on the campus community, it created a confrontation between Suk scoring 62 points and Changseep scoring 43 points, and the match had been on people's interest for a long time. Outside, the black-haired guy runs into the girl who was with Jinsu, and deep down he is jealous for her hanging out with Jinsu. The girl says that Jinsu didn't want it to go for a match, so she came here to give him company. Jinsu says that he cannot even bring himself to show his face around the club anymore after walking out the way he did, and that his original plan for the evening was just to see her home safely before heading back himself. Jinsu then goes on to mention that the three of them happen to be grouped together for a class assignment, and the guy makes it pretty clear that he finds the whole situation really annoying and uncomfortable. Jinsu also lets him know that they have a presentation coming up next week and that he is the one who is going to be standing up and presenting it for the group, since the other two are just not very good at presenting in front of people. Meanwhile, not too far away, Suk and the rest of the guys are also out walking together and talking amongst themselves about how the match they played earlier went, and someone brings up that videos of the whole thing have already been posted up online for people to watch. Suk then gets a little more serious and tells the group that they are genuinely going to need to find themselves a proper number 1 player if they want to have any real shot at winning their upcoming matches. He also brings up that their next opponent is a team called Stun from the Electronic Engineering Department, which is a matchup that carries some real weight behind it. He goes on to explain that Stun was playing in a completely different league from them right up until last year, and that on top of that, 2 students came back to school this year who happen to be a duo that has been well known and talked about ever since their very first year together. Sometime later, Jinsu heads out with his friends to grab some drinks, and while they are all hanging out together, one of his friends brings up that his former club has a page on Facebook. His friend then asks him if he happens to know a guy who goes by the name Sunny, but Jinsu says that he does not know who that is and also makes it clear that he cannot just go back to the club either way. His friends start working on convincing him that he should at least reach out and ask about it once before completely shutting the door on it, and after a little back and forth, Jinsu eventually decides to go ahead and message Jaewoo about the whole thing. As he thinks about it more, Jinsu finds his mind drifting back to a memory from around 7 years ago, right around the time when he was just starting middle school, and he recalls how there were very few people who actually left a real and lasting impression on him during that early period when he was just getting into basketball and figuring everything out. As it turns out, that person who left such a strong impression on him back then is none other than Sunny himself. During that time, basketball television shows were riding a massive wave of popularity all across the country. The format of those shows was that both professional players and complete amateurs alike would come together and form teams to compete in an audition-style competition, where teams kept battling it out until only one team was left standing at the very end. The team that managed to win the whole thing would walk away with an enormous cash prize, and on top of that they would also get the incredible opportunity to play directly against professional players with the possibility of getting drafted as a result. However, out of everyone who appeared on that show, there was one particular person who truly stood out from everybody else, and he competed under the stage name Sunny. The team that Sunny was a part of eventually went on to win the whole competition, and not long after that, riding on an overwhelming wave of popularity and a massive fanbase that had grown around him, Sunny went ahead and launched his very own basketball channel, which only kept pulling in more and more fans and eventually turned him into a full-blown celebrity within the amateur basketball world. On top of all of that, he also happened to be Jinsu's personal idol growing up, which made it all the more shocking when one day Sunny just suddenly stopped all of his activity without any explanation and completely disappeared from the scene. Back in the present, Jinsu and his friends head out together with the intention of getting some basketball in, but before they get going, Jinsu decides that he wants to grab himself some coffee first. He picks up his cup and finds a spot to sit outside, and he just sits there quietly letting his thoughts wander all over the place, until Suk suddenly shows up out of nowhere and takes a seat near him. Suk wastes little time and starts trying to work on convincing Jinsu that he really needs to come back and rejoin Team Drive, but Jinsu is not having it and turns him down flat. Suk then shifts the conversation and asks Jinsu whether he is currently taking Professor Kwan's class, the one where he teaches economics to first-year students, and it turns out that Jinsu is actually dangerously close to failing that class at this point. Suk then leans in and tries to sweeten the deal by telling Jinsu that he can get him access to the test papers if he agrees to come back. Time passes by and the first round of exams finally comes and goes, and thanks to the test papers that Suk basically forced into his hands whether he wanted them or not, Jinsu ends up doing a pretty solid job on his exams overall. Suk then tracks Jinsu down afterward and asks him, now that the whole exam period is behind them, whether he has finally given any serious thought to coming back and rejoining the club. Jinsu then catches everyone completely off guard by turning to Suk and asking him straight up whether he is actually the real Sunny. The moment those words come out of his mouth, both Jinsu's friends and Suk himself are completely stunned and cannot wrap their heads around the fact that Suk and Sunny are actually one and the same person. The girl standing nearby has no idea what is going on and asks the group who exactly this Sunny person is, so one of the guys turns to her and tells her that the easiest way to think about it is that Sunny is basically the equivalent of an idol and a legendary figure to pretty much every single person who plays basketball at any level. Suk then shifts the conversation and informs Jinsu that Woo Jin has gone ahead and left the club, but even hearing that does not seem to grab Jinsu's attention or change his expression much at all, and Jinsu simply responds by saying that he already knows that Woo Jin left the club and that it was because of him that it happened. Jinsu then tries to play it off and claims that he did not do it on purpose or because of him specifically, but it is pretty obvious to everyone standing there that that is exactly why it happened. Before heading off, Suk lets Jinsu know that their next opponent's game is starting up pretty soon and suggests that they should stick around and watch it together, promising to buy him a drink afterward as a little extra motivation to get him to stay. Suk also throws in the information that among their upcoming opponents, they are going to be going up against Team SSB as well, which is something worth keeping in mind. Some time later, Jinsu and Suk make their way over to the stadium together and take their seats to watch SSB's match, and Jinsu immediately picks out Sunhoon among the players and can tell straight away that he is looking really sharp and in excellent condition out there. Suk then gets around to revealing the real reason he wanted Jinsu here today, explaining that it all comes down to two specific players on Team Stun that he really wants Jinsu to see for himself with his own eyes. Suk explains that back when these two were still first-year students, they were already performing at a level that was genuinely right up there with Jinsu himself, and it was largely because of their contributions as starting members that Stun was able to push all the way to the semi-finals for the very first time in the club's entire history, which was a massive achievement for everyone involved. One of these players is a guy named Woo Ram, who is notably tall and just a flat-out incredible player in every sense, and Suk figures that if Jinsu can find a way to lock him down and restrict his movement on the court, then their team might genuinely have a real shot at pulling off the win. The other player Suk brings up is Youngmin, who is going to be lining up directly opposite Jinsu when they eventually face off. The match between SSB and Stun then gets underway with SSB winning the opening possession and getting the ball first. The match keeps going and Team Stun draws first blood by getting the opening score on the board, which immediately puts Team SSB on edge and gets them a little worried about what they are dealing with. One of the SSB players gets his hands on the ball and takes a quick look at what Stun is running defensively, and he figures out pretty quickly that they are going with their usual man-to-man setup, so rather than trying to take things on by himself, he makes the smart decision to move the ball along to another player instead. An SSB player then takes off running with the ball going as fast as he possibly can, but one of Stun's players manages to read the whole play perfectly and strips the ball clean right out of his hands before he can do anything with it. Jinsu watches all of this unfold and thinks to himself that their defense is seriously impressive, and Suk chimes in and adds that Stun has had a long-standing reputation for being an incredibly tough and physical defensive team that nobody enjoys going up against. He also points out that their defensive system is just a notch above what most other clubs are running in terms of organization and discipline, but that ever since Wooram came into the picture, their defense down in the post area has become especially tight and really hard to crack. He goes on to say that Jungman's arrival brought even more efficiency to their defensive side of the ball while also giving a significant boost to their attacking game, particularly when it comes to actually creating and finishing scoring opportunities. Suk then turns to Jinsu and explains that unlike him, who plays as an offensive guard whose biggest weapons are his ability to break through defenders and his sheer quickness, Youngmin operates in a completely different way, and his particular style of play is what people in the basketball world refer to as an original number one. He also says that the reason why they should be more careful about him is that he mainly focuses on game coordination and ball distribution, but when given the chance, he can score. Team Stun then throws a three-pointer shot that surprises everyone, and the match continues with Team SSB getting the ball. The match continues and both team plays to their fullest every single time. The ball gets to Team Stun and they easily score. One of the SSB players then tells the other that the person in Stun has amazing defense because he managed to steal the ball from him. After that, Team SSB also managed to score, but then, Stun continues to score with their unique defense and quick attack. However, SSB starts to succeed in their attacks, scoring with Sunhoon as the main. At the end of the first quarter, while keeping the 8-point difference, SSB succeeds in bringing up to 6 points. During break, one of Stun players tells the team that they should stop with their current defense. The match keeps rolling along into the second quarter and Team Stun is genuinely dominating the flow of the game, moving the ball around between each other with smooth and confident passing that is really hard to disrupt. One of the Stun players then finds his opening and manages to get a score, and now the ball switches over to Team SSB's possession. However, one of the SSB players looks up and is visibly caught off guard when he realizes that Team Stun has switched over and is now running a man-to-man defense against them, which is not what they were expecting to see at this point in the game. The match continues with everyone constantly moving and cutting across the court in all directions trying to create and take away space. The ball eventually finds its way to Sunhoon, who is having a genuinely tough time against the Stun player guarding him, and that Stun player is thinking to himself that Sunhoon did not really seem to be going for many shots earlier in the game. But before that thought can even fully settle, Sunhoon pulls off a slick rotating move and fires the ball into the basket in one quick and fluid motion that nobody saw coming. On this particular day, Minsik and Sichin have also made their way out to watch the game specifically to gather some useful information on Wooram ahead of their upcoming matchup, and what they are seeing out there is leaving them both genuinely stunned. Sichin points out that number 43 is capable of holding his position down in the post, handling the ball with his dribble, and knocking down shots from the mid-range as well, which all adds up to make him an incredibly dangerous and hard-to-contain player. The ball then finds its way to one of the Stun players who squares himself up and gets ready to launch a three-pointer from right around the center of the arc. The ball finds its way into the basket and the whole crowd reacts with genuine surprise at what they just witnessed. One of the boys watching from the stands leans over and tells the girl next to him that the reason it is so effective is because of how tall Wooram is, making it incredibly difficult for anyone to get up high enough to block him properly, and on top of that he points out that centers are usually pretty weak when it comes to actually shooting the ball with any consistency, which makes what Wooram is doing out there all the more impressive. After that, Sunhoon gets his hands on the ball once again and puts it into the basket just like he always does, pushing SSB's score up to 19 points and making it look completely routine. As the second quarter gets going, the back-and-forth battle between the two teams keeps intensifying, and when you compare the two big players, Wooram is managing to get his scores in with relative ease while Sunhoon on the other hand is being forced to grind through isolation tactics and win things in straight-up one-on-one situations which takes a lot more out of him. Right away, Team Stun matches SSB's energy and keeps attacking with the exact same kind of pattern they have been running, and their score climbs all the way up to 31 points while SSB is still sitting back at just 21 points and struggling to keep pace. One of the Stun players watches Sunhoon from across the court and thinks to himself that not only is Sunhoon remarkably good for someone who is still just a first-year student, but he is also genuinely and naturally talented in a way that you do not come across very often. Sunhoon goes up and tries to get another shot off, but one of the Stun players gets up and blocks it cleanly before it can go anywhere. The ball then falls to one of the Stun players who takes off running down the court as fast as his legs will carry him. Jinsu watches him go and thinks to himself that the guy is not actually all that fast, and that if that is really the top speed he can reach then catching up to him should not be too much of a problem at all. The player keeps pushing forward and drives all the way toward the basket, and just when an SSB player steps right into his path trying to set up a block, the Stun player just blows right past him like he is not even there and gets to where he wants to go anyway. After that, Stun closes out the third quarter with a comfortable lead, largely thanks to Jungman's calm and steady management of the game and Wooram continuing to put up a dominant performance, and the two teams then head into the middle portion of the fourth quarter with things still very much in the balance. The point difference at this stage sits at 12 points, and both Sunhoon and Hancheol have each picked up 4 offensive fouls from going up against Wooram, which is really starting to put them in a difficult spot. Fortunately for SSB, their shooters are finding their rhythm and playing really well, and they manage to chip away at the gap and bring it all the way down to just 9 points as the game approaches its final moments. However, with only 2 minutes left on the clock, Hancheol commits another foul and the referee has no choice but to send him off the court completely. Losing the height advantage, SSB can't stop Stun's power forward, Jong-soo. The match finally comes to a close with the final score reading 62-50, with Stun coming out on top and winning by a margin of 12 points. Even though SSB ended up on the losing side, the guy from SSB who pulled off that dunk during the game was absolutely incredible to watch and left a real impression on everyone who was there to see it. On their way back from the stadium, Suk turns to Jinsu and asks him what he thought about the match overall, and Jinsu says that Stun's center was just enormous and incredibly hard to deal with. Suk agrees and adds that what was really impressive was how smartly Youngmin responded and adapted every single time the situation on the court shifted and changed around him. Suk also points out that having both Wooram and Youngmin on the same team makes Stun an incredibly tough opponent to figure out, and that winning against them is genuinely going to be a really difficult task to pull off. On top of that, Suk brings up the fact that Stun already knows about Jinsu and what he is capable of, which means it is basically a given that they are going to throw a double team at him every chance they get to take the ball out of his hands. Suk then says that what they really need is someone who can take the ball up the court and take over and solve the game on their own when things get tough, and he asks out loud whether there is anyone on the roster who can dribble well enough to hold their own against Jungman's defense. Jinsu thinks about it and says that the best option they have for that role is Yeonjun. Suk then looks straight at Jinsu once more and tells him plainly that he needs him on this team, and after everything that has been said and gone back and forth between them, Jinsu finally lets out a sigh and tells him that he supposes he has no choice but to go ahead and rejoin the club. The following morning, Jinsu finds himself waking up early for what feels like the first time in a really long while, and the reason is simple enough since today is the day of the big match against Stun and his mind is already fully locked in on it. Team Drive makes the most of the time they have and gets together to practice as hard as they can over at the nearby park in preparation for what is coming, and there is a very clear and noticeable nervousness hanging over everyone as they wonder out loud amongst themselves whether they are actually going to be able to perform well when it really counts. One of the guys turns to Jae-woo and opens up about how he used to go into matches with a pretty casual and laid-back attitude since it always kind of felt like they were going to end up losing anyway. But now that they have both Suk and Jinsu on the roster, it genuinely feels like they are part of a team that actually has what it takes to win for once. He also admits that he worries about whether he is going to end up dragging the team down and holding everyone back, but Jae-woo is quick to shut that thinking down and tells him not to waste any energy on thoughts like that, adding that as far as he can see the team as a whole has now grown and caught up to a level that matches what he himself is capable of bringing. Some time later, everyone makes their way over to the court and gets settled in, and Jae-woo pulls Haein and Youngju aside and asks them to keep a close eye on and carefully track the number of fouls being picked up by both their own players and the opposing team throughout the match. He also takes a moment to explain to them that fouls are counted on a per-quarter basis, and that a team foul simply refers to the total number of fouls that the players on a given team have accumulated together within that particular quarter. He goes on to explain that once a team's foul count crosses the 5-foul mark within a quarter, the opposing team automatically gets awarded 2 free throws regardless of what kind of foul it actually was, which makes keeping a close eye on that number throughout the match really important for both sides. After that, the entire Drive team gets themselves together and starts warming up and getting mentally ready for the match ahead, including Suk, who wastes no time poking fun at Jae-woo for showing up later than everyone else. Right at that moment, Team Stun makes their entrance and walks onto the court, and Jinsu looks them over carefully and thinks to himself that they have brought all of their starting members out today, and that he is going to need to keep a really close eye on their center in particular above anyone else. Suk then pulls the whole team together into a huddle and lays things out for them, telling them that Stun's defense is genuinely really strong and well organized, which means they are going to have to be extra careful and thoughtful with every single pass they make out there because one careless pass could cost them dearly. He also brings up that number 15 is a center who is not only physically imposing but also has a really reliable shooting touch, so making sure someone is properly marking him at all times is going to be absolutely essential throughout the game. Jinsu then steps in and adds that they are going to be running their usual 2 to 3 defensive setup for this match and that Minsik is going to be taking on the center position as they had planned. The match gets underway and pretty much everyone watching assumes right from the start that Stun is going to walk away with this one without breaking much of a sweat, though some of the people in the audience are already talking amongst themselves about Suk and what he might be capable of bringing to the table. The ball makes its way to Jinsu and he quickly tells Suk to take a moment and get a good read on what the other team's defense is doing before they commit to anything. Both of them take one look at the setup and recognize straight away that Stun is running the usual 2 to 3 zone defense, which tells them that there is no need to go all out and push things too hard right from the very beginning. One of the Stun players then spots Suk on the other end and immediately recognizes who he is, but thinks to himself that he cannot just go ahead and throw a double team at him without having enough information yet about what the other players around him are actually capable of, since doing so blindly could open up dangerous gaps elsewhere on the court. Over on the sideline, Youngju turns to Jae-woo with a puzzled look and asks him why the players are not marking each other the way she has seen done in all the basketball videos she has been watching lately. Jae-woo takes a moment and explains to her that professional players generally have such a high shooting success rate that defending tightly against every single player is necessary just to avoid giving anyone an open look, but the reality with most amateurs is that they simply cannot dedicate the time needed to practice their shooting every single day. And that is exactly why the majority of them struggle so much when it comes to actually making their shots consistently. The reality of amateur basketball is that even if a club knows about complicated and advanced tactics, actually putting them into practice effectively in a real match situation is a completely different story, and for that very reason the large majority of amateur teams end up defaulting to the 2-3 zone defense since it is the most manageable and reliable option available to them. Jinsu is fully aware of this and takes the time to lay out 5 key points for his teammates to keep in mind going into the match. The first thing he brings up is that Suk's physical abilities are on a completely different level and that nobody on Stun's roster is realistically going to be able to match up with him one-on-one. The second point he makes is that throwing out an inexperienced double team or a box and one setup without being fully prepared could easily end up backfiring badly on them. So in order to get a proper read on where the other players stand skill-wise, they are going to play it safer and stick with the zone defense for the time being. The match then gets going with Suk getting his hands on the ball and pushing hard past a bunch of defenders on his way toward the basket, but just as he gets close enough to do something with it, Wooram steps right into his path and towers over him. Suk takes one look at just how tall Wooram really is up close and ends up just kind of tossing the ball toward the basket without much conviction behind it, and sure enough it does not go in. Eventually the ball finds its way to one of the drive players, who moves it along quickly to Jinsu, and Jinsu immediately fires it off towards Suk with a really sharp and fast pass. After that, Jinsu manages to put a score on the board for his team and Drive now sits at 5 points while Stun is still back at 3 points. Watching that play out, one of the opposing players takes note and thinks to himself that Jinsu is clearly well above the average level of player you typically see at this stage, and that he is going to need to keep a really close and careful eye on him going forward. The ball then finds its way over to Youngmin and from that point on Stun's scoring starts to slow down noticeably, as getting the ball into the high post position becomes increasingly difficult and Drive on the other end keeps running into Stun's really tight and disciplined defense every time they try to push forward and create something. After that stretch, Team Stun gets back into their rhythm and starts moving the ball around between each other with confidence, and they manage to find an opening and get a score on the board for their side. Jinsu then gets his hands on the ball as well and converts it into another score for Drive, which prompts him to immediately turn to his teammates and tell them to make sure they are properly marking him going forward because his shooting touch is genuinely really good and leaving him open is going to cost them. The match picks right back up with one of Stun's players pushing hard and doing everything he can to drive toward the basket, but Team Drive fails to stop him and he ends up getting the score anyway. Since the shot goes in while contact is being made at the same time, the basket counts and he gets awarded an additional free throw on top of it, but the free throw ends up missing and Drive regains possession of the ball and gets their attack going once again. Jinsu starts loosening up and warming himself into the game, telling himself and those around him that all they need to do is consistently do a little bit more than the other team is doing and the result will take care of itself. As he gets into the flow of things, Jinsu quickly picks up on the fact that the opposing players are specifically keeping an eye on his shooting, which is something he had already fully expected them to do going into this. After that, Jinsu takes off driving hard toward the basket, and when two of the Drive players close in and cut off his path completely, he immediately reads the situation and fires the ball off to one of his open teammates, who catches it and puts it in the basket with ease. Not long after that, Jinsu gets his hands on the ball once again and manages to weave his way past a whole bunch of players on his way forward. However, he ends up getting shut down and locked up by Youngmin, and no matter which direction he tries to move or shake free, Youngmin just refuses to give him even an inch of space, so Jinsu makes the smart play and gets the ball over to Minsik instead, who catches it and scores without any trouble at all. Meanwhile, Jae-woo is standing on the sideline thinking to himself that Jinsu has been an absolute lifesaver for the team and that the reason the match has been going as well as it has is almost entirely down to what Jinsu has been bringing to the court. One of the Stun players then turns to Youngmin and tells him to go ahead and pass the ball over because he is heading to the same spot anyway and wants to go ahead and test something out that has been on his mind. The match keeps going with Youngmin sending the ball over to that player, who then catches it and puts up a post-up shot that goes cleanly and directly into the basket without any trouble at all. Watching that play out, Youngmin finds himself genuinely impressed because he had honestly expected that the height difference between the two players involved would put his teammate at a pretty clear disadvantage in that situation, but it turned out not to matter at all. The ball then gets into the hands of one of the Drive players who sizes up the basket and goes ahead and puts up a shot, but it just refuses to go in and comes bouncing back out. After that, things get even tougher for Drive as Sichin comes up empty trying to score from under the post, and Youngjin misses a mid-range shot as well, and all of that gives Stun the opening they need to keep pushing forward with quick and sharp attacks. With only 1 minute left on the clock, Team Drive is really struggling to hold things together against Team Stun, And things are looking especially rough for Yongjin, who has already picked up 3 fouls and is in serious danger of being sent off. Woo-ram steps up to the line and knocks down both of his free throws without any difficulty, and one of the stun players glances over at the drive player nearest to him and thinks to himself that this guy is simply not posing any kind of real threat on either end of the court, whether it is on defense or offense. The ball then finds its way to Suk and he takes off and weaves his way past a whole bunch of players with everything he has got, but even with all of that effort he still cannot manage to get the ball to go in and comes away with nothing to show for it. Youngmin then gets his hands on the ball on Stun's end and wastes no time getting it over to the tallest player on his team, who catches it and puts it up and into the basket to push Stun's score all the way up to 20 points. The match then keeps rolling along and the ball makes its way to Jinsu, and as he looks up and takes stock of the situation in front of him, he finds himself standing face to face with Youngmin with nothing between them and everything on the line in that single moment. With just 5 seconds remaining in the first quarter, Jinsu fights his way into Stun's side of the court while battling hard against Jungmin's suffocating defense the entire way. However, with the clock basically already gone, he has no real choice but to throw up a mid-range shot, and Woo-ram gets up and swats it away clean before it can go anywhere, and just like that the first quarter comes to an end. Suk immediately turns to Youngju and asks her how many fouls Yongjin is sitting on at this point, and she tells him that he is already at 3 fouls, which causes a wave of frustration to ripple through the whole group when they hear it. Suk then points out that the other team has definitely noticed this and is going to make it a point to keep targeting and going at Yongjin in the next quarter as well in order to try and foul him out of the game entirely. Jinsu then speaks up and suggests that they should think about putting Jiango into play, but Jiango himself is quick to push back on that idea and says that he would just end up getting completely overwhelmed out there because Stun is simply on a different level from what he can handle right now. Suk then steps in with a different suggestion, saying that what they should do instead is shuffle their defensive positions around, with him dropping down and Yongjin moving up to the front to take some of the pressure off of him. Jinsu then adds on to that by telling his teammates that he is going to make sure to position himself on the left side, knowing that Youngmin is nowhere near as comfortable or confident when he is forced to go to his left hand, which should give Drive at least a small but meaningful advantage to work with going into the next quarter. After that, the second quarter gets underway and the Stun players almost immediately pick up on the fact that Team Drive has made some changes to their defensive setup from what they were running before. The glasses guy from Team Stun sees his opportunity and pushes forward without hesitating, launching the ball straight into the basket and pushing Stun's total up to 22 points. On the offensive end of things, Drive continues to have a really hard time trying to work anything against Stun, who has been steadily getting a better and better read on how Drive likes to play and is starting to take away all of their usual options before they can even get going. With about 2 minutes left in the offensive possession and absolutely no room to find a clean passing lane anywhere, Jinsu decides to just force his way in and shove a pass through to Yongjin, who happens to have a window open up for him at just the right moment. 7 minutes into the second quarter, the situation gets even tighter as Jinsu finds himself once again with nowhere to go and no one he can safely get the ball to, and he ends up being forced into attempting a pass over to Suk just to keep things moving. Team Drive then calls a timeout and Jaewoo quickly waves everyone in and gathers the whole group together to talk things over and figure out what adjustments need to be made going forward. During the timeout, Jaewoo pulls Yongjin aside and asks him straight up why he seems so nervous out there, but Yongjin insists that he is not nervous at all. Jaewoo then tells him to take a good long look at the teammates standing around him and asks him whether the people he sees look like someone he can count on and rely on when it matters. Yongjin takes it all in and Jaewoo then tells him to just relax, hold his head up high, and go out there and show everyone that he is someone who genuinely matters and has something real to contribute to this team. After that, the story drifts back into a flashback from 4 years earlier, where a group of kids at school come up to Yongjin and ask him if he wants to come out and join in on the basketball game they are putting together for Sports Day. Yongjin tells them honestly that he does not even really know how to play basketball properly, and after thinking about it he decides that he would rather just hang back and watch the match from the sidelines instead of getting involved. As it turns out, pretty much everyone around Yongjin back in those days used to look down on him and talk about him like he was a complete waste of space, constantly pointing out that for someone with his kind of height and physical build, he was doing absolutely nothing with the natural advantages he had been given and was just letting it all go completely to waste. For the very first time in his life, Yongjin finds himself feeling a really strange and unsettling way about everything, because the people around him had built up their own expectations of him entirely on their own without saying anything, and now they are turning around and giving him a hard time simply because he is not living up to standards that nobody ever even told him about in the first place. Right at that moment, a girl makes her way over to him and tries to lift his spirits and encourage him to keep his head up. She tells him straight that it is honestly not a good look for a guy to let himself fall into a slump just because of what other people are saying about him, and that he needs to shake it off and just keep playing the game he loves regardless of what anyone else thinks. Back in the present, the match picks back up and Team Drive is playing with an intensity and energy that is something else entirely compared to what they were showing earlier. Eventually the ball finds its way to Yongjin, and he delivers a really sharp and impressive pass straight to Jinsu, who immediately takes off driving hard toward the basket. The stun players all scramble and do everything they can to chase him down and cut him off, but Jinsu manages to slip past every single one of them one by one and then launches a long pass out to an open teammate. At that very moment, Yongjin comes flying in completely out of nowhere and gets his hands on the ball before anyone can react, throwing it straight into the basket and leaving absolutely everyone watching completely stunned and unable to believe what they just saw. How long do you think it will take for Drive to fully click as a team with Jinsu back in the lineup? Comment Rim Ding Dong if you'd like a part 2 of this series. Make sure to subscribe the channel for more sports manhwa recaps.